Okay, and
Oh.
now it's my pleasure to announce the second talk in this afternoon. Fasano from University of Firenze. Some other places, and he will talk about modeling angiogenesis and tumor growth. Please.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank Jose Francisco and the Russian colleagues and friends for inviting me, because as I already told, I'm very affectionate to Professor Solognikov. So this is my great pleasure to wish him a happy birthday. So my talk is concerned with the phenomenon of angiogenesis in tumors, and the general scheme of angiogenesis is illustrated here. All cells in our organism are fed of oxygen and nutrients from nearby capillaries. And oxygen diffuses towards the cells, and it is used up by the cells. But this works within very short distances, say 100 microns. Because after that, there is no more oxygen available. So what happens when a small tumor grows? Here we have a small tumor, and the tumor, of course, is void of any blood vessel, and its life depends on the nearby capillaries, which exist in the host tissue. But when it grows at the center of the tumor, oxygen becomes insufficient, so the tumors, this inner region, becomes hypoxic, and so in this situation the tumor should die. But cells tumors are unfortunately smart. So when they found that the oxygen level is not sufficient, they start emitting some chemical signals, some proteins, which are called tumor angiogenesis factors, and these chemicals diffuse towards the nearby blood vessels. And when these substances reach the blood vessel, they stimulate the cell of the blood vessel to duplicate, and gradually to form a new blood vessel, and eventually a whole blood network blood vessel network is formed, and the tumor at that point can grow indefinitely. So this is the phenomenon of angiogenesis. It was discovered in the early 70s by this man here, Folkman, and well, very soon it became evident that if we can block this angiogenesis, then we can starve the tumor, and we can control its growth, or we can even eliminate it. But well, this plan never was successful. There are anti-angiogenic drugs, but they still have serious side effects. So the problem of how to control angiogenesis is still open, and is still very, very hot, say. And this is a plot showing that in recent year, the research has concentrated very much on this topic. So this blue line are the medical papers, the red line are the mathematical papers. So the basic model I want to refer is was appeared in this paper a couple of years ago, and this paper was in collaboration with a very good friend of mine who unfortunately died before the paper was completed. And now I will show a general sketch of the model and how we have elaborated on that subsequently. So first of all, I want to outline that the model generates traveling wave solutions, and this is a fact that was well known in the tumor literature. So in 1996, this paper appears by Gatenby and Gawinski. Gatenby is a radiologist and Gawinski is a physicist, and they worked on a mathematical model able to reproduce this phenomenon which has been observed in reality. So you see this gap here between a tumor mass and the host tissue, and the tumor mass advances against the host tissues. Why that? Because the metabolism of the tumor is such to generate an acidic environment in which the tumor can survive, but the normal cells die. And this creates this gap of, say, dead cells, degenerating dead cells, and the tumor can proceed. And so Gawinski formulated a mathematical model, including the host cells, this green line, the tumor cells, the red line, and the concentration of H plus ions of protons. So say the pH of the medium, and they found a nice traveling wave behavior. So eventually the tumor, this profile translate from the left to the right, and the whole space is invaded by the tumor. Now, in the recent paper, very recent actually, together with Carmela Sinisgalli, we investigated more deeply the traveling waves behavior of the solution of the model published in 2021, and also on a background of say of a free boundary theory. Now I have to explain how the new vessels grow. Here is a pre-existing vessel in the host tissue, typically a capillary. And when the TAF, the tumor angiogenesis factor, whose concentration we know by capital P, when these molecules reach the blood vessel wall, then the cells, the epithelial cells of the wall reproduce, and gradually they grow towards the tumor. And this is a multi-stage process in which only eventually we have the mature vessel, the mature blood vessel. The concentration of mature blood vessels is denoted by V, and there is a preliminary stage in which the so-called sprout cells form first, say, a provisional vessel, immature, not complete, in the form of stalk cells, so-called, and the direction of growth is chosen by other cells, which are called the sprout tip cells, which mainly follow the chemotactic information, so the gradient the gradient P. And but also they vibrate randomly. So the way the new vessel growth is a combination of some deterministic information which is provided by the gradient of the concentration of the interstitial concentration of the tumor angiogenesis factor and this random vibrating component. So this is the underlying mechanism. Now we have several quantities entering the model. The host tissue concentration, cells concentration, the tumor cells concentration. We have some pre-existing vasculature in the host tissue. We can be arterioles and venules. We have the newly formed mature vasculature in the tumor, and the concentration denoted by V, and the other two types of cells, W and Z, and W in particular is a kind of cells which is responsible for the choice of the direction in which the new vessel grows. And next we have chemicals, the tumor angiogenesis factor, as we said, with the interstitial concentration P and the oxygen concentration sigma. Next we have, we introduce a volume fraction occupied by cells, which is by definition is less than 1. And it cannot it cannot say exceed this limit value, which we call the crowding threshold. Of course, if the volume is already occupied by many cells, no, I cannot put there more cells. So all proliferation and mobility terms in the model will be limited by a cutoff factor, which is of this kind, with P, say, equal to 1. So B of phi is a limiting factor both for proliferation and for mobility. Now, how does chemotaxis work? Well, the cells are equipped with sensors which bind to the tumor angiogenesis factor, and through this sensor they are able to measure the TAF concentration gradient. So if there is more of this TAF on one side than on the other side, they understand that there is some gradient, and so they orient themselves in that direction. So we introduce this say this function representing the concentration of bound receptors. Now the model has several equations. One is for the tumor cells. So the tumor cells are generated at a rate which depends on the oxygen concentration. So this is an oxygen-controlled proliferation rate. They die at a rate which also depends on the oxygen concentration. So if the oxygen concentration exceeds some threshold, they have a fixed death rate. But when they become hypoxic, then the death rate increases. And then we have also some diffusion. And here you see that the limiting factor due to overcrowding is appearing both on proliferation and on the diffusion. In the host tissue, we have very similar things, but what is new here is the term which is expressing the aggression of the tumor on the healthy tissue. So this is a shortcut with respect to the paper by Getabeli and Kavinsky, which introduced also the proton concentration, deriving from the metabolism of the tumor cells. So here we suppose that when N and H, tumor and healthy cells, are present at the same place, then N destroys H at some rate. And in addition, we have some diffusion, which is important actually only when some gap is generated. Otherwise, in the healthy tissue, H is basically constant. But it is exactly this tumor aggression term which is responsible for the generation of traveling waves. The oxygen diffuses very fast. The diffusivity, d sigma, is large. So in the time scales of the tumor growth, the oxygen diffusion is obeys a steady equation. And not only we have diffusion, but we have the oxygen supply from the vasculature, which can be the pre-existing vascular or the newly formed vasculature. So the one generated by the phenomenon of angiogenesis. And of course, oxygen is used up both by the tumor cells and by the healthy cells. The angiogenic factor diffuses through the interstices, which is full of liquid. So this is a typical diffusion term in porous media. This is a very typical phenomenon, the diffusion in porous media. And it is here we have the production of angiogenesis factor, which depends very much on which is production by the tumor cell, and depends very much on the oxygen concentration, because production starts when the oxygen concentration falls below some threshold. And of course, these molecules attach to the epithelial cells to stimulate angiogenesis, so they are absorbed, and there is some natural degradation. The host vasculature, well, the venules may be destroyed themselves by the acidic environment created by the tumor cells, while the arterioles are more resistant. So the concentration of arterioles is supposed to be constant. Dead cells, okay, they are generated by the death of tumor cells, the healthy cells, all the cells participating in the angiogenesis process is generated by the death induced, or the healthy cells induced by the tumor, and all other origin of dead cells, and they dissolve gradually at some rate. And in addition, we have some diffusion, which also plays some role. Now we go back to the angiogenesis, because now we have to describe the model for these three quantities: the mature vessels, the sprout stalk cells, and the sprout tip cells. and this is the model. So the mature vasculature is formed by the presence of the stalk plus tip cells, and it is stimulated by pre-existing blood networks, and there is also some death term. And the stalk cells are proliferated from the tip, and at some rate, and we will see how. And of course, they disappear because of the transition from immature to mature. This is nothing that the positive term we had in the other equation, and there is some death. The tip cell evolved in a quite complicated way, so they need a slide by themselves. And we see here the equations that are rather complicated. We have generation of tip cells directly from the existing vasculature. We have anastomosis, and this is a term we have already seen. And we have some death, and here we have chemotaxis. This is classical chemotaxis. Well, is not the classical chemotaxis. Classical chemotaxis is say has a proportionality to the gradient of the density of occupied sensors, the sensors occupied by the TF. But here the phenomenon is very particular because, first of all, we are talking about cells which are not free to move. They are attached to the growing vessel, so they cannot have an arbitrary large velocity. So the maximum velocity they can have is this U tip, which is a product of the average displacement at the cell duplication, which is basically the size of the cell itself, times the proliferation rate. Beta is the proliferation rate. And the proliferation rate is, you see, depending on the concentration of the occupied sensors, again multiplied by the limiting factor due to crowding. The generation of W itself is also of the same kind. So again, we have this B. And going back to the chemotaxis term, you see here that this is conceived in such a way that this factor Q is by construction less than 1. So we have this factor U tip, which is a maximum velocity that can be attained during this chemotactic displacement. And so no matter how large the gradient is, this the chemotactic velocity will be limited by this quantity. So we do have a chemotactic displacement, but which is governed just in direction by the gradient of the occupied sites, occupied sensors, but it has to be bounded by construction. And this diffusion component is due to to the random component of the behavior of the tick cells, which I remember I said they vibrate randomly. So there is a superposition of this vibration, of this random vibration, to the deterministic behavior fixed by chemotaxis. So the next slide will explain how this diffusion term is generated. And here is the formula providing the diffusion, this apparent diffusivity. And it is derived through a very long derivation, making several approximations, which are all applicable in the range of parameters we are at our disposition. So what this gamma here, which is a dimension times to the -1, so it's a rate, is called the tumbling rate, and it regulates, say, the frequency of the cell's vibration, and it has to be such that 1/gamma, which is called the persistent time, has to be much shorter than this called observation time. So the observation time is the time at which a tumor grows to an observable in an observable way, which is typically, say, 1,000 hours. It grows, say, by 1 millimeter. And while this 1/gamma is 10 hours. So this approximation is very well justified. Well, there are some a priori properties that can be proved for the very complex model we have formulated. And well, I skip this. These are all very intuitive properties. And the numerical results show that traveling waves are developing. So this is the behavior of the oxygen concentration after, say, 120 days, 240 days, 360 days, so approximately 1 year. And the same for the tumor's angiogenesis factor. And you see that the traveling wave for the cell population is very clearly visible. We start with some very small tumor without any vasculature, and we follow the concentration of the tumor cells, which is the dotted red line, and we see that after 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, it advances very steadily and very smoothly against the tumor cells. So this is what the numerical show. And well, a similar thing can be seen for the vasculature, the forming vasculature. We have, you see, the angiogenesis, which takes place, this is very interesting, exactly on the propagation front, and practically only there, and it leaves behind the steady mature vasculature. Now, it is well known that in the classical theory Kolmogorov, Petrovsky, Piskunov, associated with the traveling wave in reaction diffusion systems. The traveling wave speed is proportional to the square root of the diffusivity. And we found this very precisely in our model. So varying the diffusivity of the tumor cells, which is responsible for the advancement of the front, where the velocity of the traveling wave is very, very close to the square root behavior, as shown here. So this indicates that the traveling wave nature of the solution. Okay, so we skip this. So the very interesting thing is notwithstanding the model complication, it fits the experimental data very nicely. So in the experiments, the density of the formed vasculature has been measured, and this is fitted very nicely by our model. So I must say, in memory of my friend Alberto Gandolfi, that he was very good at finding the biological parameters, which is in this kind of research is absolutely essential. Now the final question: can we interpret this as a free boundary? Because the moving front of this traveling wave is very sharp, so it suggests a free boundary behavior. So let's introduce this unknown boundary, separating the tumor by the host cells. Now we take the limit case in which the front is collapsing to a sharp interface, which is our free boundary. Now there is an obvious equation, an obvious condition on the free boundary. So the free boundary is traveling and is transporting some cells, then this mass has to be provided by diffusion. So this is the mass balance condition on the free boundary. And the other condition is empirical. Who is responsible for the advance of the free boundary is the presence of some tumor cells. So we just assume that the free boundary velocity is proportional to the local volume fraction occupied by the tumor cells, and because of what we have found previously about the square root behavior of the traveling wave velocity, this coefficient must have a square root dependence on the tumor cells diffusivity, and this is for the tumor cell diffusivity we have chosen for the previous calculation. This is the corresponding value of the coefficient capital theta. Now we can reproduce all the calculation, taking the limited case in which the healthy cells die instantly when they are reached by the tumor. So we have a condition, a simple condition for n, for the density of dead cells on the free boundary. And this has some computational advantages because the domain is smaller and we don't have to deal with the component H, so the system is reduced. And what we find is that the two models give exactly the same results. So actually, we are dealing both with a traveling wave system and with a free boundary problem. So this is what I had to say, and I just conclude with one more best wishes to a rare person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for a nice talk. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question. Maybe I missed. Am I right that your model is spherically symmetric?
Exactly. Yes.
So 3D and spherically symmetric. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Jose Francisco. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Well, thank you for your very nice talk, Tony. Very complex, but very interesting model. I have a natural question. Of course, I'm very pleased to see a free boundary there, but that's not my question. My question is, you have many parameters, and one of the important things is to control the growth of the tumor. So playing with those parameters, do you have any way to make a control, I mean, to reduce the speed or even to stop the growth of the tumor? It's a control problem. It's a mathematical control problem.
It would be nice if we can stop a tumor controlling the
parameters. I know, but I mean from the pure mathematical point of view.
What we need actually is a drug controlling the parameters. And this will be the next step. This is what I'm working on now. So on the use of how drugs intervene in this model, controlling the parameters. So there are many different kinds of drugs. They can act directly on the cell receptors. They can confuse the cells, or they can destroy the tumor angiogenesis. In fact, there are many different types, and we're trying to see what we can do. Okay, so this is an interesting development.
Yeah, but because your model was based on the oxygen diffusion, right?
Yes, oxygen plays a basic role because the tumor cells send out these substances saying, look, we need oxygen. And they do it when the oxygen concentration is reduced. And precisely these molecules will stimulate the endothelial cells of the existing blood cells, of the existing blood networks, to create a new blood network. So oxygen is a pivotal quantity in the whole thing, in angiogenesis. I would say it's the pivotal quantity.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering, as just a pure mathematical control problem, if you can reduce the diffusion of the oxygen, so you reduce the tumor growth. So in the model, in which terms could this oxygen reduction, of course, with drugs, with many other, I mean.
Well, you see, oxygen diffusivity is one of the most well-known parameters in the model. I would say is the only one which is actually quite well known, and we can do very little with that. Oxygen diffusivity is very large, so oxygen goes through the whole system in seconds, and so we cannot play with that. We can play with cells diffusivity, which is rather small, and that's it. I mean,
Okay.
I repeat, in order to control the evolution of the system, we need something from the outside, which is drug.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there more questions? Yeah, Adelia, please.
Yeah.
Claudia,
Yeah. Antonio,
that's a
thank
good
you.
friend.
Yeah, good friend. It's a pleasure to see you. This special occasion of our dear friend Seva birthday. So and thank you very much for your fantastic talk. It's wonderful to hear you again and to see you again. So as you said, so I'm interested in so the Alberto Gandolfi was very concerned with the results from for the parameters obtained from biology. I think that all the simulations you got, you have very complex models. The models you present have many parameters, and you got some simulations for some of them are for sure based on parameters obtained from literature, which have been carefully observed by Alberto Gandolfi, or
Right. He was great in that.
yeah, and perhaps this is a source of controversy, because I'm sure that in this field it's not easy to find different parameters coming from different sources and so on. So
indeed, we could just say that some of the parameters vary in some range, so we can have an idea of the range, not the exact value. But
yeah,
of course, if we stay in that range, then the results are reliable in a sense.
yeah, this is essential in order to get some reliable results, to get to use parameters coming from literature or some experiments. But the experiments here, it's quite difficult to get, of course. And
Yes, but unfortunately, people have examined real tumors and found the concentration of the angiogenic
and
angiogenic network.
sometimes it's possible to get to work with people in the lab doing some experiments with rats and so on, and getting
yes
from animals, and also use them directly. So it's not the same.
But we were very pleased we could fit the experimental results. Indeed, it was a kind of a surprise, because the model is really very complicated.
Yeah.
And there is no way of simplifying it, because it's each brick is fundamental, I say.
Yeah, I remember that once you said, no, I will not work anymore on tumors, because we will never arrive to any conclusion. We cannot stop tumor growth. And so
I understand this is very disappointing.
Not control cancer. And so it's useless for mathematicians. It's still your you think like that still, or you change your ideas and you are still working on this field?
Well, I was very stimulated by this kind of research. We started with Alberto Gandolfi, and I wanted to continue.
Yeah.
Also in his memory.
Yeah. No, there is still a lot. There is a lot of people working in the field. There is a lot of things to do, and perhaps somehow there is progress in the.
Let's hope.
Let's hope that somehow this will contribute to save people one day, but we don't see how it can be possible. But okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurelia.
It was a pleasure to see you and our dear friend Seva all together in this fantastic meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Are there more questions or comments? If not the case, let's thank the speaker again. Okay.